In this video, I'm going to show you some places in Israel that you will never have seen before. The reason I'm so sure you have never visited these places is that this area is only open for 3 days a year, and it doesn't even do that every year. If you want to get dramatic about it, I might say that it's maybe only been open for a total of 15 days in the last decade. The reason it is closed is that it is a border area, and so there are minefields here. For each place I mention, I will let you know if you are actually allowed to enter or not. Do not try to enter places you are not allowed to go into. You will be stopped by the Israeli army, Jordanian army, or blow yourself up by stepping on a mine, and we don't want that to happen. There is a lot to talk about in this area, and I will be focusing on 3 topics: the monasteries you can find here, the Zionist settlements in the area, and the border between Jordan and Israel. I will be adding chapters to the timeline so you can jump to the part that interests you, but it will all be interesting, I think. I will also be adding my take on the relationship between Israel and Jordan, but I've decided to save that until the end, as not all of you are going to like what I say and agree with it, and that, by the way, is perfectly fine. So before we start, let me just set the location of the area on the map. We are dealing with the most southern part of the Jordan River. Many people are not aware of the fact that the Jordan River flows into the Sea of Galilee and then out of the Sea of Galilee and all the way to the Dead Sea. I'm going to talk about the last part, from the area of Jericho to the Dead Sea. I mentioned Jericho because the first event that made this area what it has come to be today involves Jericho. According to the Bible, Moses brought us out of Egypt, but died before entering the land of Israel. It was Joshua who brought the Israelites to the Promised Land. The first city that Joshua conquered was Jericho, so this place right next to Jericho is thought to be where the Israelites crossed the Jordan River. Its name in Arabic is Qasr El Yahud, or the Palace of the Jews. Now in Judaism, this place doesn't hold any significant meaning, but it is important to followers of Jesus. According to the New Testament, this is where John baptized Jesus. This is the first time that God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit are mentioned together in the New Testament. The connection here between the New Testament and the Jewish Bible is clear. The spot where Joshua brings the Israelites to the Promised Land is where Jesus leads humanity into a new era. The first monastery I want to show you is Dir Hijla, which is the Arabic name for the Greek Orthodox monastery of St. Gerasimus. The name Dir Hijla comes from the settlement that is referred to in the Hebrew Bible as Beit HaArava. Anyway, as you enter, you will see that there are loads of drawings of lions, and that is because of the story of Gerasimus, the monk who established this monastery in the 4th century, who saw a suffering lion and helped it by removing a thorn from its paw. After that, the lion stayed at his side, and when he died, the lion remained at his grave until it also died. Inside the church, you will see some skulls and bones. They belong to monks who died during the Persian invasion of 614 and an earthquake that occurred 200 years ago. Around the monastery are caves the monks lived in during the week, and they met only once a week for a communal meal. Today it is a very nice place next to a main road. We actually have this new road to thank for making it so accessible, and the leaders of this monastery to thank for making it such a beautiful spot. It is now very inviting, but until just a few decades ago, it was extremely isolated. The next place I want to show you is Qasr El Yahud, where John the Baptist baptized Jesus. It is only in recent years that the State of Israel opened this site and made it accessible to tour groups, but now many groups visit this site, especially groups from the Eastern Church, so Russian, Greek, Ethiopians, Coptics. Now this is not what you expected the Jordan River to look like, I know. Israel, Syria and Jordan have built dams to control the flow of the Jordan River's water, so these parts get very little water. Now if you're like me, you are probably thinking, I can dive in and swim to the other side and take a look at the Jordanian side. Then stop. Don't do that. You will soon find yourself in jail and getting deported. This brings me to the next monasteries that I want to show you. All of them are located in a restricted military zone. Do not try to enter as there are mines here. In Hebrew we have two names for this area, the land of the monasteries, and soon you will see why, and the land of the chasing. From 1967 to 1970, lots of Arab terrorists came from Jordan to attack Israelis. The Israeli army chased these terrorists, trying to catch them before they harm Israeli citizens, and this is why there are minefields here. This is the Ethiopian monastery, Dir Hijla. The Ethiopian church is one of the oldest churches, and they have preserved some Jewish customs, such as keeping the Shabbat Saturday as a resting day and maintaining some of the kosher rules. This monastery is quite new. It was finished in the 1930s. It was financed by the last Ethiopian emperor, Haile Selassie. In the 70s, Arab terrorists from Jordan shot at the monastery and it was abandoned. Once a year, Ethiopians visit the place where I'm standing now, but they don't enter because of the risk of mines. I highly recommend you visit the Ethiopian church in Jerusalem. This is the Syrian Orthodox Church, which is another small Eastern church. They too preserve some ancient customs and speak in an Aramaic dialect. There is also a Russian chapel, as this was a major Russian pilgrim site at the beginning of the 20th century. I read somewhere, maybe it was a British or American explorer, who wrote something like, "We left Jerusalem and made our way to Jericho and the Jordan River. The land was abandoned. It was only me, the tour guide, our donkey, and 5,000 Russian pilgrims." The reason that these churches have preserved some of the customs from the time of Jesus is that they separated from the church in the 4th century. If I were to ask you what the two main churches in your country were today, you would probably say Catholics and Protestant or Catholics and Orthodox, but there were many other divisions in the church. The biggest question in the 4th century concerned the nature of Jesus. Did he have two natures, a human one and a divine one? Or did he have one nature and was God and man together? Those churches that didn't accept the main church's decision that Jesus had two different natures left the church and became independent churches with their own customs, some of which haven't changed since the 4th century. Now I want to talk about something totally different, Zionism. This area has a very interesting Zionist history. I'm not going to start from the beginning, but rather from the end. One of Israel's rock music pioneers is called Shmulik Kraus. Now, this man was, as we say in Hebrew, a beast. He was a sailor, he got married 3 times, he opened Israel's first rock club, he was violent, he got arrested many times, he spent time in jail, he was hospitalized in mental institutions, and he wrote a beautiful melody about his childhood memories of the kibbutz that used to be here, Beit HaArava, where his father worked and where he spent many weekends. It's hard to believe that this wild man wrote such a peaceful melody about his childhood memories. The name of the song is Beit HaArava. I will leave a link to the song below. Jewish settlements began to be established in this region in the late 1920s and were connected to a man called Moshe Novomeisky. He came from a family of miners in Siberia and opened the Palestine Potash Company under the British Mandate authorities. The factory was a success. One day, one of the workers, Moshe Zakovich, noticed that vegetation was growing next to the pump bringing water in from the Jordan River to the factory. The fresh water was dripping onto the salty land and making it fertile. leading to the idea that it was possible to wash the salt out of the land and start growing fruits and vegetables. Their experiments were soon successful, and in turn a village was established here in 1940. It was given the name Beit HaArava. The crops here flourished. Even today, as you look around, it is hard to believe that this was all fertile land, that in the middle of this salty land, in this extremely hot weather, Zionist pioneers succeeded in creating life and prosperity. By 1948, it became clear that there was no way to protect this isolated village, and it was evacuated and completely destroyed by the Jordanians. Only a few buildings that were used by the potash factory can still be seen today. After the Six-Day War, only the cemetery of Beit HaArava was renovated by Israel. This area is closed to visitors, and you are only allowed to enter with the army's permission. The last site I want to show you is the place where the Jordan River enters the Dead Sea. Now this spot is very special, and this is the first time that I've seen it. But before that, a word about the path along the Jordan River. The Jordan River from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea is part of the border between Israel and Jordan. The border crosses the Dead Sea and continues all the way to Eilat and Aqaba. It is 310 kilometers, or 190 miles long, and this is the longest border that Israel has with its neighbors. The relationship between Israel and Jordan is an interesting one. Even before the peace treaty was signed, there was cooperation between the countries. Secret unofficial meetings between Israelis and Jordanians started before the establishment of Israel. King Hussein met with many Israeli officials throughout the years. It was kept quiet as Jordan was weaker than Egypt and Syria and dependent upon them. Sadly, although a peace treaty was finally signed between Israel and Jordan in 1994, almost 30 years ago, it is a very cold peace. Those who work in the tourism industry usually talk about the positives, and as a guide, I do recommend that you also visit Jordan if you are visiting Israel. But there is a sad reality that we need to talk about. Many naive people in the West think that it is the governments that want wars and power, and that the simple people just want to live in peace. This is not the case here. The Jordanian king had a very good relationship with Israel, but it is the Jordanian people who hate us. Not all of them, of course, but a vast majority. After the peace treaty was signed, tens of thousands of Israelis went to Jordan, but you will not find any Jordanian tourists in Israel. If a Jordanian lawyer visits Israel, he gets banned from the Jordanian Lawyers Association. If a Jordanian writer visits Israel, he gets banned from the Writers Association, and so on. Israeli films, or even films with Israeli actors in them, are not shown in Jordan. Here is a funny but sad story, a true story. When Israel was about to win the Eurovision Song Contest, the Jordanian Broadcast Association terminated the broadcast, instead showing pictures of flowers, and said that Belgium, who came in second, had won. The Jordanians, like the Lebanese, the Syrians, and the Egyptians, may not be very good at having an open-minded democratic society. They may not be that great with technology and innovation. Women's rights, minority rights, and free speech may not be highly valued either, but they are really very good at hating Israel. This is where they do outstanding work, and this is why they are all failing countries. They are driven by hate and not peace and cooperation. I wish I could be more optimistic, but if this is what the border looks like after 30 years of peace, then it is time to state the unpleasant truth. I value the truth more than the typical content that a travel vlog is expected to provide. But I don't want to end this video on a depressing note, so I'm going to show you the place where the Jordan River enters the Dead Sea. Because it is right on the border, it has been left untouched, and what a beautiful view. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. The tourists are starting to come back and it is wonderful, but the truth is that I enjoy making these videos so much, showing you places off the beaten track and talking about issues that you don't get to talk about when you are with a group. I want to keep on making these videos. If you like my work, please consider becoming a member or purchasing my app or booklets. All links will be below. See you next week. Yalla bye.